Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started now because the counter here is already starting to count down, and they don't want us to be late, and we have a full 55 minutes approximately to get through a certain amount of territory. First, the back of the scene, and there should be a graphic here showing that. We have 4 startups here. 3 are doing full rockets, 1 an engine, and the likelihood is that at least 3 of them are going to fail in 5 years. That's really not a cynical thing to say. That's just the hard reality of launch vehicles and small launch vehicles. Those that survive will have an even tougher time making a profit. Launchers don't talk very often about return on capital invested, but they should, because that's what the investors are there for. At a meeting in Lampoldshausen, Germany, by the German aerospace agency, DLR, in March or April, the president of the French Space Agency put up a really cool graphic, and it showed most of the small launchers being developed right now in Europe. It didn't include Pangaea, it didn't include a couple of others, so it was just a representative sampling of a dozen. They were all lined up like little soldiers. And he said, our view at Kinéis is that in a really, really ideal world, maybe 1 or 2 are needed in Europe, and that's it. That's the reality of what people expect for launchers. Nobody expects, if Arianespace can't make much money ever, that also little launchers will come along with private investment and be much more efficient than Arianespace. It's possible, but it's really unlikely. So at the end of our 53 minutes, I hope you come away with an idea of what each of these 4 companies is doing in terms of what technology they're using, what investments they have, what their schedule is in terms of getting off the ground, and what their overall economic model is. Who are they looking for? Because in addition to these guys, there are at least 3 or 4 nations in Europe that want to have their own spaceports. Yuppie, spaceports too. Who's ever made any money on a spaceport? Maybe nobody. Nonetheless, in addition to the French Space Agency offering to open the Guyana Space Center for small launch vehicles, there's activity in the UK at least 2 sites in the UK and Scotland. There's activity in Norway to transform a sounding rocket base into an orbital launch site, and in Sweden, same thing. Germany, which has had a change of government, also had its own idea of a launch base in the North Sea, and that was an idea of dubious economic realism. It wasn't because of that they've now canceled the idea. It was because the new government has a higher quotient of Greens, of ecologists, than the former government, and they didn't like the idea of launching rockets in the North Sea off an offshore platform in an environmentally sensitive area. So that's where we are in Europe. In addition to these 4, you have Daniel Neuenschwander, who's the director of launchers at ESA. And I'm not joking, he has a really hard job, because he has a bias. He likes to see activity. He likes to see startups. You heard ESA, if you were here before, the director of criminalization there. They all love new space because it brings new blood, new activity, and it's cool. It is really cool. But Daniel has to do something with taxpayer money so that he's not favoring one too much over another. And at the end of the day, ESA will be in the room when somebody decides, okay, these 5 or 6 who are left, we have to whittle those down to, say, 2. And that's not going to be an easy discussion. The last piece I want to reference is, it is still not sure among the major backers of among governments in Europe, UK, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, and I'm excluding Norway and Sweden just for the spaceports, how much money, how much cash in the form of subsidies, they're willing to invest in these vehicles. It's really not clear. So far, the only nation that seems to have said, we can ask Maya Space in a bit, that it is willing to add subsidies to startup launchers is France. And that was the former government's Minister of the Economy who said that, and who has now got the same job in the new French government. So that might be a difference. Otherwise, in the UK, in Spain, in Italy, there's not much public money going into small launchers. These guys have to live on their own. And a couple of them here have raised a decent amount of money. We'll find out about that later. So I'm going to ask Daniel to speak after the 4 of them to get a sense of the variety of what you got here. Remember, there are at least 3 times as many companies as are here trying to do the same thing, which is to enter a really, really tough business. Let me start with PLD Space of Spain, who is doing something both with a small payload capacity launch vehicle and reusability. So Raul, tell us a little bit about PLD. Remember, some people on the web here don't know what you are.
Okay, so PLD Space is, well, first of all, thank you to invite me to see here. It's an honor. And PLD Space is one of the, I call us the original micro-launcher company. We found the company in 2011. And we are one of the companies that will survive in the future, I hope. And PLD Space, we are planned to do our first demo flight by the end of this year. It's a suborbital rocket with the complexity of a booster. And our plan to do our maiden flight, it's Mira 5, it's 550 kilograms to SSO orbit payload capacity orbital vehicle in 2024. That day will be the demo flight of the orbital one.
Sorry, from which base?
Yes, from Kourou, from French Guiana.
Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of money or financials, that it's very important to be very, let me say, efficient at the beginning of the when you start up a business to develop a launcher or a launch service provider. You need to invest a lot of millions before the revenues. So we are optimizing that, and we invest until today just 45 million euros. And we don't need more at that date. So we will invest the 100+ million euros when we feel that PLD is prepared to do that investment and to stay very, very close to the revenue, because for us it's very important to return or to be profitable, real profitability, you know, with no heritage, with no starting from the very scratch.
Okay. And where'd that money come from, without being indiscreet?
It's 70% private investor. 70%, and 30% it's public, small ESA contracts, small national contracts.
Okay. All right. ESA Space, Joseph. ESA Space is maybe the most famous among the small launcher efforts in Europe, because ESA Space is in aerospace is in Germany, and it won a competition about a year ago, a first-round competition for 11 million euros, which means you owe DLR now 2 launches, I think. Again, that money wasn't just to go develop; it was to buy 2 launches that DLR will furnish to you. And you've raised a couple $100 million last I checked, around there. And so the money doesn't seem to be your problem now, but tell us where you are on the financing and on the schedule.
Sure. So from our side also, thanks a lot for inviting us here once again. We're very happy to be here. So ESA Aerospace, yes, maybe one of the more famous companies in Europe in that field. But we're also actually just a 4-year-old company. So we founded out of the Technical University of Munich, 3 guys of us in 2018. And in these 4 years, we basically managed to grow the company from, a super small classical startup company to a company of 270 people today, with a funding of almost 200 million euros. Which is at this stage, of course, enough to finish the development and the first launches of the rocket. Now, where are we on the technical side? We are today developing on all subsystems, progressed quite a lot. Of course, engine testing, very, very famous. We're on that at the moment. Also, structural developments. The rocket itself, avionics, guidance, navigation, and control is all on the way and almost in flight configuration. Also, what is very important, the infrastructure around it. So we have a launch base right now under construction in Norway. We are aiming to see at least another one to cover equatorial launches. Also, we may never overlook the fact, and that is maybe what we consider extremely important also on the way to become a cost-effective launch service provider. We have a very, very strong manufacturing department, which enables us an extremely high vertical integration. So we can actually manufacture in our premises 80 or 90% of all the parts of our rocket, which gives us full control over the technology. That's what we wanted from the beginning when we started the company. We're there right now. It enables us to iterate extremely quickly on development steps, and it also enables us to really see where we have the huge cost blocks, and then we can remove them as quickly as possible. So therefore, we are really aiming to be as cost effective as possible and to be able to work without state subsidies, which we do at the moment, so we can go 100% private funding. We have, of course, won DLR micro-launcher competition, as you have mentioned. We have also won a prize by the European Commission of 10 million euros just the beginning of this year, to mention a few. So I think we are very well on the path to, of course, becoming a cost-effective and self-sustaining launch service provider.
Okay, so a Norwegian launch will be your first launch in principle?
So the Norwegian launch base is under construction.
Yep.
And the first launch, yes, we will see from Norway.
Sometime in 2023?
Yes, depending on when it is ready, sometime, early 2023, 1 year roughly from now.
Okay, just one quick question for Raoul and Joseph. Are you dependent on any countries that you don't want to be dependent on for any components or technologies? Got anything from Ukraine, Russia, any of those places?
No, luckily not. That's what I said in the beginning, out of the wish to be highly independent as a company. So we're neither on the investor side, nor on the supplier side, nor on the customer side. We are dependent on any country or company that we do not want to be dependent on. So
very, very nice position to be in for a startup.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't need to substitute Russian or Ukrainian suppliers, which is very good for us. Of course, we see some prices going up as well, so I don't want to deny that.
That's for everybody.
But yes, but the rest, I think we're in an extremely independent position in Europe. So all our supply chains are in European Union, hardly anything outside of it.
Okay.
So
and when you said you've got Norway for polar launches, and you're looking for an equatorial site. There's one about 9.5 hours by air from here, south by southwest.
Yes, there is an obvious one, 9.5 hours from here. So, of course, we're interested to launch out of French Guiana. At the moment, there is nothing under construction, to be perfectly honest. But, yeah, as I said, this is something that we're very, very deeply looking into as well.
Okay. Well, any Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, anybody from that region that you depend on for hardware?
Yes, no, it's same for us in terms of, we don't have any subcontractor there. And we are suffering, extremely in terms of lead times, prices are going up super fast. And not much issues at that level. Also because we have also our infrastructures in terms of testing, engineering, production, and everything. So we are not having been impacted too much with the global situation.
Okay. Let me move on to MayaSpace. Johan, those who don't know Johan, I first met Johan when he was Chief Technical Officer and Deputy CEO of Eutelsat, which is a satellite fleet operator, which has very healthy EBITDA margins. And now he's going into a launcher startup. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry what happened. But now you're in a launcher startup. I don't know how many times a month you must have said, "Oh my God," when people show you some numbers from launch services. But tell us what MayaSpace is, how you were born, what your development goal is, and who's paying the bills.
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. So you know me a little bit, you know that I like challenges. So let's speak a little bit about MayaSpace. So MayaSpace is developing and will manufacture and commercialize the first partially reusable and eco-responsible launcher. Our first flight is scheduled in 2026. And our baseline launch pad will be Kourou in French Guiana. The schedule of 2026 may sound a bit late compared to alternatives, But what is very important to have in mind regarding Maya is that we have maybe a different approach compared to our peers and competitors. We consider that starting everything from scratch is not necessarily the most efficient and the quickest way to reach a first flight. And our objective is to leverage some building blocks that are under development, namely the Prometheus engine and the Themis demonstrator that are developed in the frame of a contract between Ariane Group and the European Space Agency. Maya Space has been created as a spin-off of Ariane Group and has received some seed funding from Ariane Group. But we will soon be looking for external investor to fund the development of our launcher.
Is Ariane Group supposed to remain a majority equity shareholder forever and ever?
The objective of Ariane Group is to remain a reference shareholder of Maya Space.
Reference shareholder, okay. You hear the figures occasionally, Johanna. I know from your past life you're comfortable with the figures. The rule of thumb, and Owl mentioned it, is that it takes somewhere around 100 million to start a small vehicle, get everything necessary, the permitting, the licensing, the development, the testing, now you get your first launch, and that's going to run you roughly 100 million. Is that still in the ballpark rule of thumb?
Yes, that's correct.
How do you plan to get that 100 million?
How do I plan?
What's the plan to get that 100 million?
So the idea is to look for private funding. As I was saying, we've received a seed investment from Ariane Group, and we will look at the private market to get additional funding.
Okay, that's a 2022 event or a 2023 event?
It's most likely end 2022 or 2023, beginning 2023 event.
Okay, and we hear a lot about Maya, so if I'm picking on you, it's because we do, from the French government and so on. I mean, are you going to be looking for funds from France 2030?
No.
No? Or Def Invest or nothing like that?
No.
You're not looking in that direction? Okay, fair enough. And Maya Space has sometimes been described, and I want you to describe it because you're the president of the company, as a two-headed animal. One head is technology demonstration, to be useful for everybody. Ariane 6 follow-on, Vega E follow-on, a wonderful thing, tech demonstrator. And then also a company that has to worry about profitability, finding a market and appealing to that market and being operational on a regular basis. How do you marry those two things? Because two-headed animals don't last very long.
For me, the two objectives are very consistent with each other in reality. You have given the figure. It takes several hundred million euros to develop a rocket. The market is growing, but is not infinite. So you need to be smart to get your money back. This is what, of course, a private investor will be looking for. So the idea is to find ways to mutualize the cost, the development cost, so that they can be more easily recouped. If you look at the technology of reusability that our launcher will use, developing this technology has a cost. A necessary condition to make this profitable is to mutualize this cost not only on the small sat market, but to look at the entire market. And so for me, it's perfectly consistent that Maya Space be also a technology demonstrator for the future family of the European launchers, because this technology, the cost of this technology can be made more easily profitable if we look also at the heavy launcher market.
Okay, we'll come back to that because I think PLD has also got a reusability chapter in its development, and if I listen to what Rocket Lab and SpaceX have said, if you've got a reusable rocket, you're going to pay a 20 or 30% payload penalty because you've got to reserve all that fuel to come back. That's a lot of penalty for a small launcher, but we'll come back to that. Pangea, you are not developing a rocket, but an interesting engine. Tell us where you are on the engine, where you are on the funding, what your schedule looks like, and also how do you get from an engine to a rocket?
Okay, so yeah, I will start for thanking everyone for having us here It's a pleasure. And yeah, Pangea Aerospace was born 4 years ago with the idea of being another micro-launcher. And as you all know here, it's pretty a crowded area, to say the least. And we had in mind a very technology differentiator that came with the engine, which we are building an Aerospike engine, which, for the ones who doesn't know, is a type of rocket engine that gives you up to 15% more efficiency when getting into orbit. That what it's translated directly into more payload into orbit for a single, for the same rocket, or using less fuel for achieving that goal. So we came out to the conclusion, okay, we have something so different that let's start on this technology block, because as Johan said, we do not believe that you have to do everything from scratch, from the ground up, from the zero, as, for example, ICER is doing. That I completely understand the reasons why they are doing it, but we don't share it, because in the long term, I do believe that it doesn't pay off. Because for sure there are solutions right away on avionics, on expertise in, I don't know, tanks, you name it, already existing, that you can partner with those suppliers to actually get to make a profitable business. If you have it to do it internally, everything, it's for sure more costly. That's why you need those more or less 100 million. So we decided to go first for something still very complex, rocket engines, but that we have a lot of expertise. We actually hot fire tested a demonstrator in Nampelshausen in 2021, late 2021, which is a 2-ton Methalox engine, completely 3D printed, and it's the first rocket engine of this type ever fired, period. I mean, not in Europe, in the world. So we are, of course, as you can imagine, very proud of that, and now it's about scaling up. But the important thing here is that we want to build these technology blocks, not only because we can provide a better product that is reusable, because on our end, we do believe that reusability is key, and not only reusability on first stages. This type of rocket engines could be very interesting for actually doing full reusability vehicles that, in the end, is what we believe will matter. Because, as you mentioned, yes, if you have a reusable vehicle, you have a payload penalty. And what's the issue? We all believe in the sector, that the sector will boom as is booming, and the needs for new satellites to be launched, not only in LEO, but you name it, in space exploration, you will have a payload penalty, yes, but it will be so recurrent that it will matter, because, I mean, then the market will tell the truth in the end. But I don't have the crystal ball, but I do believe that the way of seeing it on reusability, it has a payload, of course, but then I think Mr. Musk tweeted it many times that with 2 launches, it's already paid off. So I think we have to reshuffle the way we think on this payload penalty and reusability. And now to answer more on our developments, so now we are scaling up that engine. So we are building a 30-ton engine, still Methalox. Once again, we do believe that greener propellants are very important for sustainable space. And here with methane, it's a technical decision, but also very important from a, let's say, sustainability point of view, because you can even start thinking of biomethane and even having a carbon neutral engine and a carbon neutral, I mean, almost carbon neutral launcher in the long term. And we want to do this in the next 2 years, so we want to have this engine qualified in 2024, and also, why not, making a first test flight by beginning of 2025. I mean, as I said, first technology blocks, the engine is pretty complex. No Aerospike have ever flown in history, at least that we know. Potentially the US Air Force is doing something about this. And then from that, scaling that up, and also being able to provide this solution to not only European actors, but to everywhere in the world.
Okay, so let's just take out to 2025 and what you've just described then, before you have your partners who have the other components of making a rocket. So how much money do you need to get there? How much money you got now? And how do you get from here to there?
Okay, so up to now we raised more or less 8.5 million euros, both in private and public. 8.5.
8.5 million.
Yeah, and we do believe that to get to that first qualified engine and first flight, we will need more, let's say 20 to 30 million more. And actually we're currently fundraising our Series A. And of course, to develop all the product family that we want, we will get to that 70 to 80 million, because we don't want to stop on the micro launcher sector. We want to really go as large as we can, also going for medium class launcher engines. And also if we tackle and we really understand the capabilities of this technology, we can tackle everything and exploring reusability on everything. Yeah.
What you're doing, for those in the audience who don't know, is really runs counter to the fashion now in what's still sometimes called the new space industry, which is serious vertical integration.
Yeah.
Not just for launch vehicle producers, but for satellite builders as well. They don't like going outside to buy stuff. They want it all in-house. I wouldn't have predicted it, but there it is. So what you're doing is really against the grain, because you need a whole bunch of partners to come in with you to turn your cool engine into a vehicle.
Absolutely, but then the risk is shared first. So if I win, my partners, suppliers win. So it's not only one champion, it's many. This is the first thing. But this on the long term. Once again, we are seeing for example, from the US, that now more companies are appearing not doing everything and just doing one thing very good. This is the case, for example, of Ursa Major, which is an engine manufacturer. It's the case of Adrian, which is only component manufacturer for the whole aerospace defense sector. So we do believe that this wave of doing one thing very good has to come and will come also to European soil soon. I understand why now everyone has to rush. We don't have to rush to that. I mean, we have to rush, but not at the same level, because we are coming and generating what we call the next generation of technology for launchers. And if we all agree that the sector is booming from the private perspective, we have to really inspire ourselves from other industries. And every mature industry have a whole launch of suppliers. It's always putting the same example, but Airbus is not building the planes, the engines, the airports, and the airlines. They're doing, I mean, they are integrators, and it's very difficult what they're doing. So something similar will happen, it's our belief, in the space sector. Potentially it's not a 2-year thing, that's for sure, right. But on the midterm to the long term, verticalization, I don't think it's viable.
Okay, SpaceX looks viable, at least at this point. We don't know their profit and loss statements, they don't publish that, but they're just as vertical now as they ever were.
I absolutely agree, but SpaceX is only one data point.
True, fair enough. Yeah, you're right. No, that's a fair point. Sometimes seems like more than one data point, but it is only one data point. All right, let me turn to Danielle Nunes-Schwander, Director of Launches at the 22-nation European Space Agency, which has a ministerial coming up at the end of November. And for Danielle, the very good news was that with the $2 billion or so contract with Amazon for Ariane 6 launches, the pressure on Ariane 6 that would have been felt at ESA, CNES, and to a lot of the space industrial base system in Europe is now a lot less. That's very good news. The bad news is that now Ariane 6 has a contract with a fixed schedule attached, because Amazon is under regulatory deadline to get its satellites up, and there are several thousand. So they've got to move quickly. On the small launcher side, ESA in 2019, at its last ministerial, put together a program it was called Boost back then, or CSTS, whatever it was called. Basically, not much money, 50 million euros or so, half of which was invested by Germany, a quarter of which invested by the UK. Spain was in there, Switzerland was in there. I don't remember the 6 countries. France was not in there. So small French launch startups for the last 3 years have not been part of the ESA Boost program because France decided not to invest. I suspect that will change at the coming ministerial, given the amount of time that French government officials talk about small launchers now. I suppose they're going to go into the Boost 2, or whatever you're going to call it. But give people an idea, just in a couple of minutes, Danielle, on how, if you know that in 10 years, most things that we're talking about now will be just a memory, and there might be a launcher or two. If you believe that scenario, it's not just CNES who believes it. How do you get to that point with the least amount of pain, meaning spending, as possible? Because right now you're sort of forced to help a whole lot of different companies, not with a lot of money, but with some, get started, because it's part of what ESA does. ESA is an R&D agency as much as an operational agency.
So good afternoon to all of you. And let me start by saying if you have an issue with pain, don't work in launchers, just to make it as clear. But having said that, you spoke rightly about Ariane 6, but I mean, first let's put a bit things into picture. In 2021, we had at worldwide level 145 launches, out of which 14 were coming from micro-launcher companies, 10 in the US, 4 in China. So I'm really excited to be with these gentlemen on stage today because they bring in a new dimension. They bring in oxygen, to be very clear. But at the same moment in time, we have to keep the data points right. Having said that, our key objective on the short term is to bring first Vega C into the market and then Ariane 6. Vega C hopefully very soon. Ariane 6 following, hopefully. The ramp-up is there. You spoke about the Amazon contract in the context of Ariane 6. That's great news, for sure. That's a good news. That's not a bad news. That's an excellent news. And I think it motivates all industrials involved in this great project, Ariane 6, because we are phasing out. We have to realize we're the family of European launchers composed of Ariane 5, we have 5 missions to go, of Vega, we have 2 missions to go, we have Soyuz, which disappeared since the 24th of February. This is reality. Our main objective first is to bring these European institutional payloads as far as possible back on European launch opportunities. Second, to introduce into the market Vega C. Third, to introduce into the market Ariane 6. And fourth, but equally important, really bring into the European landscape of space transportation the service dimension, going from systems to services. And this is why we created, as you said, in Sevilla 3 years ago, the Commercial Space Transportation Services Program called BOOST. And let me give you one data point here. Up to now, we had injected through ESA with accumulated support for activities for 40 million. This led to additional private investment of 200 million. So the factor 5 here is interesting. That's really the interesting point. And I think we should build on this model to enhance it to the maximum extent at CM22. And we will prepare the future along 2 ways. One is to go on the future launcher preparatory program where we have an institutional requirement, and then it is justified also to inject taxpayers' money. Second, to support, and I would like to see more successful commercial space transportation services of European nature arising at the horizon, but according to the new set of rules. And we want to enlarge this. Because we want to enlarge it, we think we can bring to these companies punctual expertise. We can bring to these companies punctual co-funding, but there are some rules of the game associated to that. No liability for ESA. It's industry authority, meaning also industry responsibility. And to be clear, I am in charge to propose freedom of action in space for Europe, meaning we have to ensure continuity. We cannot rely, if I may say so, on a point which is not, let's say, controlled in a continuous way. But what we can rely on is on several sources. And this is what we are starting to build up. This is what we are starting to build up. We open a new chapter. As I said, first, market introduction of Vega C, Ariane 6, and I can tell you over the next few years, there will be a number of payloads to be launched. So this looks good. And I'm really looking forward to see 1, 2, whatever the number is, of these projects coming up at the European level. And over time, and don't ask me when, but over time, this will bring up additional capabilities with one objective which is shared, and I would like to conclude on that. We conducted last year some new European space transportation studies. And what I really liked is that we got a lot of replies from established actors teaming up with new entrants. And what was really also interesting was, to keep it short, is that in all replies, it turned out that the proposal was that at the Horizon 2030, we should have a European 2-stage-to-orbit capability to serve first LEO, which should be fully liquid, which should be environmental friendly, and of course, reusable. if you say that, you have to take the consequence out of it. Then you're not going to build a Starship. So, which means that if you want then to enhance your capability towards exploration, towards in-orbit servicing whatsoever, you have to work on mission extension vehicles. And this stream is coming through in Europe, and we have now to build together a model which is taking on board a new reality which is coming in. It's not today, it's not tomorrow, but it's coming in at the horizon where we have a shared objective. And I think this work towards a shared objective in terms of service is already a big step ahead. And once again, I'm looking forward to be on such a panel with whom we'll make it.
Let's unpack that. 40 becomes 200 million. So that's 40 million euros that ESA decided on at the boost program in 2019?
Yes.
That has since been not just matched, but multiplied by 5 times by private investment once the companies getting that original ESA program money got theirs. They were then able to turn to the private sector and say, I've got this kind of quasi-validation from ESA, and that opened the door to ultimately 200 million. Is that right?
Yes, and what I have to say, this is an average along all the projects. But if you inject €1 of public money through Boost, you get 5 in addition. So 6 in total.
Yeah. I'd love to spend some time looking at those figures. But okay.
Anytime.
All right, all right. As you know, Daniel, in the United States, NASA, the U.S. Air Force, the Space Development Agency, they've taken on a policy, and several years old now, of basically giving contracts for service launches to companies that have never launched anything. They've never had a failed launch, they've never had anything. They don't have anything on Launchpad. So it's a speculative investment. They don't get a lot if they fail, obviously, but they get initial backing from the U.S. Space Force, the U.S. Air Force, and then they turn around to the private sector and do what you said people do with the boost financing. Is ESA willing to make an investment in a company that has not yet launched anything?
Let me turn it the other way around. What ESA is ready is to act as anchor customer. And I wrote, by the way, to the companies on my European micro launchers who have projects. I wrote to them a couple of weeks ago asking for where they are in terms of maturity in the development, what are the milestones, what are the achievements. And what we really want is to address this point of saying, okay, we are going to launch, it's a TBD number of ESA missions. First, of course, let's be clear, it will be first smaller missions, IOD, IOV in a 200 kilogram class. It will not be a 6-ton mission for sure. But we want to give this perspective to win a competitive bid. And the best will do it. If we say that, by the way, we have quite a sensitive political discussion which we will have with our member states, because back in 2019 we had a payload allocation policy for ESA missions, and then the topic was especially to handle, let's say, the treatment between Vega C and Ariane 6. This was a topic. Today we have these gentlemen on stage. We will have another coming up. So we will have to rethink this model.
So the new model is that any of these companies who have not launched anything, they could respond to an RFP from ESA under this program for a service, and they could win it even if at the time of the signing of the contract, they have still not launched anything, correct?
This is not what I said. I
okay.
said they can enter into the bid. Then the conditions under which we will allocate the contract must show some gates. I mean, at least, if somebody has not demonstrated to me that he has an engine on a test bench, he can best have the nicest PowerPoint. I will believe in the data coming from the test bench. Forgive me that.
Fair enough, test bench, but not necessarily an orbital mission success.
Certain technical milestones will have to go through, and this is a topic on which I now do not go further because we have to discuss it with our participating states. What are these key criteria? But we have some ideas from the executive on that.
And that's something you want on the program you're going to be giving to ministers in November?
The point will come up. The point will come up among the member states of ESA, and it will have to be debated as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Today, I apply the rules which are in force, but it is clear that with the evolving landscape, we have to think if this model is still appropriate, and we'll come with some proposals.
Okay. Obviously, a lot of small launchers, startups in Europe are concerned, are looking out to see any signs of ESA being in favor of one or another vehicle. So you heard Johan from MayaSpace mention Themis and mention Prometheus. I believe both, though, certainly Prometheus is available to other small launchers if they want to use it at cost or thereabouts from the prime contractor. Is that right?
That's a very interesting point. I think this will be a key success factor for the upcoming ministerial and future ministerials. Under which condition can a product being developed in an ESA framework made available to other actors? And this notion of commercialization of this product is fundamental. We are today, as you know, we have the Prometheus engine, which is under development under an ESA framework, as a matter of fact, Themis as well. And we are right now in the process of defining with the prime, which is Ariane Group, as you know, these conditions. And this is for me absolutely fundamental, because it is the only way to ensure also a certain fairness. Yep. And let's not also forget, we have to be precise. It is not an off-the-shelf product that you will just plug and play in a rocket and then you say, okay, you launch. I mean, you will have to do some minimum adaptations on that, and we have to make sure that the fairness is ensured in all, not only in the selling price of the engine itself, but also in all the adaptation or services required to tailor it towards another vehicle.
Okay. And what about if I'm in Norway or Sweden and I say, geez, ESA has been working at the French Guiana Space Center on French territory with French investment for decades now. I'm worried that somehow some investment might slip through the cracks and get down there that we don't have access to, but we should have access to it too, because we are now saying we can also offer an orbital launch site. How do you handle that?
So first of all, at CSG, the main objective is to secure freedom of action based on our ESA-developed launchers. So the topic is Ariane 6, Vega C, and at least Space Rider until the demonstration is done before it will be handed over to commercial activities. So the financing of CSG is linked to this strategic objective, which, by the way, let's recall it here, CSG is paid by all ESA member states, not only the ones participating in Ariane 6 and Vega C, because it's ensuring the gateway to space. Having said that, when we adopted the resolution, the CSG for everybody is financed through a resolution at each ministerial, approved once again by all 22 member states. And the point was already coming up at the last ministerial at CM 2019 about this point with this financing. Is this not a certain dumping, let's be clear, to offer other services for other actors? And what we have put in place then is a list of criteria and a policy, a so-called user fee policy, which has been developed over time and which is now debated with our member states, in order to ensure that for the launch range activities, this is done, there is a fee and it is paid at, it's the same like Prometheus or Themis, let's call it the market price. Now, let's not forget it, that this fee is linked to the launch range activities. The launch complex activities for Ariane 6 and Vega C is our ESA-owned infrastructure. So it will be up to the companies coming at CSG to handle this with CNES.
Yeah, CNES says several months ago, I think it was earlier this year, CNES issued a call for proposals from small launchers saying, if you're interested in maybe using the Guiana Space Center, tell me. And 13 companies responded. So not everybody developing a small launcher in Europe responded, but you're saying that ESA is aware that you can't do anything that will make it look like you're favoring CSG over Scotland or Norway or Sweden or wherever else. Is that?
So just for the sake of clarity, at CSG, France has the possibility to conduct national activities, whatever they are. which is part of the overall deal because France also finances a part directly, not only through ESA. And it's keep it simple, it's a 2/3 ESA member states, 1/3 France directly, and if you take the French share through ESA, it's basically half-half. So France has the possibility to conduct own activities on which we don't have a say. But on what we have a say is to ensure that the investments through ESA are done in a way that there is an equal treatment of all the actors. And this is why we work on this user fee topic, that a certain service has a clear price tag, and this is known. And by the way, we are in close discussions with our Norwegian friends, with our Swedish friends, and whomever will come up. Because let's also be clear, aviation 100 years ago also had, let's say, some needs for sovereignty, let's call it like that, and the commercial business was developing, and I'm pretty sure that we will have a development on the commercial side as well, and I'm really looking forward to additional commercial spaceports.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask you four guys. First, Pangea, is what we've been talking about here in the last 2 minutes, does it matter to you? I mean, is it worthwhile being worried that somehow because of the half-century of investment already by France and ESA in CSG and certain number of technologies, that this will put the thumb on the scales a little bit to the detriment of other startups? Is that a worry or is that not a worry?
It's a tough question. It's not a worry, but of course you have to look carefully what's happening everywhere, and let's see, in this case, France will do with the France 2030 money and the recovery funds on actually building kind of a boost-like program, or more like putting the finger on the scale. But no, for us, it's not a...
At the moment, what Joseph said, you're satisfied that's okay. That doesn't... Okay, Joseph. Same question.
Well, for us, I think a few things that Daniel, you said are super interesting, of course. First of all, the change in mindset of ESA to also show the willingness to work together with startup companies is great, not just for ESA Aerospace, but for all of us here on the table. That ESA wants to act as an anchor customer is, in my opinion, a massive boost for the startup companies. We have profited from it, and you don't need to look at the numbers, as you suggested before. I can confirm if there is some state money given into it as anchor customers, what you could call it, there is actually the possibilities that private investments massively cumulate on that. So that part is great. Also, the fact that infrastructure, and I call it now infrastructure, can be made available to startup companies is a massive advantage. Of course, ESA Aerospace, in my sense, wouldn't profit from Prométhée today because we have designed our launch vehicle for our own engine. And that is not easy to change or quickly adapt. It's almost impossible, I would say. So we're not profiting from that, but surely giving infrastructure to startup companies is something that we welcome a lot. On the other end, we are never at the standstill. You said before, ESA has invested decades into CSG. We're building now, at this moment, completely from scratch, a launch base in Norway. Without a lot of ESA involvement. So at this moment, we would welcome ESA a lot to work together with us. And we hope after the ministerial, of course, this will come much more to life than it is now. But we think direction is definitely correct one.
You accept the fact that the highway that ESA has built to the French Guiana Space Center is a legitimate highway to assure access to space using the Ariane and now Vega vehicles. And you can't just get rid of that highway just because now you have to have an open competition. So there's going to be some advantages somewhere to somebody going down to French Guiana.
Well, of course, definitely you cannot remove that highway now, and we would never demand that. I think what is the demand of us, and I believe that I speak for a lot of micro launchers, is that we are treated as equal partners, or as partners that can really give an angle, a completely new angle to the European space landscape in that sense. And of course, we're giving our best in that sense, and we would really love to have ESA as partner, as customers, suppliers, and so forth.
I'm sure you would. So would everybody else. Raul, same question. Is this a concern for you that the established order in Europe in launch vehicles is going to be a headwind for any small launcher startup?
Not at all for us, because we also enjoy this investment boost that one ESA contract provokes to a newcomer like us. So we won our first ESA contract in 2016 or something like that. And after that, our brand in the private investment sector changed a lot. And at that day, there are no small launchers under development. There are no roundtable dedicated to this. And I remember a lot my first trip to CSG, and it was in 2017 or something like that. And we start to talk with the team there, try to develop they call us internally the new CSG. And for me, it's super happy to see how the maturity level of this is going up and up and up, and we are also applying in this competition because we believe, I think also the main of the micro launchers and the development in Europe, we believe in the competition, so we need to compete. Of course, to collaborate, in my opinion, or in our opinion, it's hard because it's hard to fit requirements technically, financially, and also commercially. And we see the European Space Agency as a customer. So we want to convert the access to space in something that you can purchase in the market, like you purchase whatever other component or whatever other thing. So, and I think the change is to move, the responsibility of the launcher that ESA they has the mandate to ensure that Europe has the capacity to have the access to space. But maybe in a decade, when my colleagues and also PLD, we have our vehicles under operation, maybe in terms of cost, reliability, maybe our competitor at micro launcher level, of course, will be hard to compete with us. So we believe a lot in competition, but it's important that we mention to have a fair competition, because for us, we develop everything from scratch, not because we want, because we don't have the heritage. So for our very small company, for us, it's impossible to purchase other engine because there are nothing previous PLD, and the access to this kind of technology, in my opinion, has no sense. Not because there is no availability on that, because in terms of price, lead time, flexibility, and so on, it's hard to purchase current launcher technology and to put it in the Miura 5 vehicle. It's super hard. So this is the reason why we are developing everything from scratch, and we are happy with the ESA position right now.
Okay, so if I hear in 2 months that a lot of small launcher startups are complaining privately that they think the system is rigged, that wouldn't be you. You don't think the system is rigged.
Yep.
You don't. No, you don't. You think it's not rigged. It's fair so far. Yes?
It's fair if it's fair. So, at the end at ESA, and I think all the audience know that all the geo return, so all the contracts sometimes come from negotiation at national level because the national entity, they need to put the money there and so on. So, for example, in our nation, in Spain, we are, pushing to participate more at national level and in the next ministerial, in the BOOST program, because for us it's super important to participate or to have the opportunity to apply to this kind of contracts.
Okay. Johan, in terms of the market from iSpace, you've got your vehicle now, you're taking the payload penalty, it's partly reusable, right? Not fully reusable, right? The Prometheus engine, which is a hell of an engine, if it meets its promise, we'll see, but the specs on it are amazing. And that's yours. What is the likely market you're looking at? Never mind the tech demonstrator aspect of Maya, but what's the market? Is it mainly governmental? And in the government, is it mainly military for rapid response, or is it all over the place?
So it's obviously a mix. Huh? We cannot afford to put our eggs into one single basket, and the market is both commercial and institutional. And coming back on the remark you made earlier about the cost in terms of performance of the reusability, actually it's even worse than what you said. Huh? You spoke about a 30% performance impact. This is the case when you implement reusability on a heavy launcher. For a smaller launcher, the impact is higher than this because you do not benefit from the same economies of scale. But I would say this is the engineering view. The business view is that when you operate your reusable launcher in expandable mode, then you gain a significantly higher performance. And this opens to you a new market. In the case of Maya Space, the market we can address with the expandable version of the launcher is overall twice higher than the one we can address with the reusable version.
You will have an expendable version.
Yes.
Of course.
We need actually this to make our business plan profitable. And this is the beauty, actually, one of the beauties of reusability. You can, with one single launcher, address two different markets. So get higher cadences, be more resilient to the market evolution, and so overall get a much better business case.
And just last word here, because the gong is about to sound. For PLD, reusability is an option from Euro 5. It's not just that, it's maybe that partly? Or
Yes.
how would you say that?
Yes, our financial model, it's fully profitable without reusability, but we need reusability in the long term. And we need to...
Why?
Because of the cost reduction of the launcher. So we understand that technology, when the maturity level of that technology goes super fast, also adding this penalty in terms of performance, for example, if you do propulsion landing, because our strategical, our concept to reuse the rocket that was proved in 2018 inside ISA program, and the FLPP, we just adding a parachute, we can recover the booster. Because of the size of the mission, you need to penalize something in terms of orbital maneuvers and so on. But if we can develop that very promising technology, we can reduce our costs, not divided by 2, but 40% or something like that.
So a 50% payload penalty for a small launcher, more like that?
I would say at least, yes.
At least, okay. That's a lot. All right, we are out of time. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck to you all, and would you join me in thanking our panelists?